Happy Friday, everybody. I hope you've had a productive week. Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. In an incident concerning on many levels, Central State-run Economic Information Daily, part of Xinhua Media, reports that two of its reporters, Wang Wenzhi and Cheng Zilong, were attacked yesterday, Thursday, at a China Railway 7th Group construction site on the Hexin high-speed railway in Anhui Province, a relatively poor province which hugs the much wealthier Jiangsu and Zhejiang provinces of the Yangtze River Delta. The two state media persons were conducting a follow-up investigation of the use of substandard materials used in railway construction. That is, the use of wrong, dangerous material in the construction of a new high-speed rail line, an incredibly dangerous thing to do. The two had previously exposed the practice in a report earlier this week. Of course, the two most disquieting features of this incident is, one, the fact that even high-speed rail, which is supposed to have the highest levels of scrutiny and supervision due to the nature of its in-use, can fall prey to so-called Tofu Dreg practices, and two, that even reporters from the most important central state-run media outlets face this sort of treatment at local levels when investigating corruption. Let's examine some of the first report from earlier this week. Quote, "Elastic cushion layers are crucial materials in railway track construction, directly affecting the stability of railway operations. Recently, reporters from the Economic Information Daily discovered at the construction site of the Hexin Railway, Hefei to Xini, that several construction units were cutting corners to save costs. They were illegally replacing the EPDM rubber elastic cushion layer with substandard recycled rubber imitations, which have performance far below design requirements and pose safety hazards. On October 26th, reporters visited the construction site. Reporters randomly pulled out several newly laid elastic cushion layers from the limiting grooves. Using a wallpaper knife, they made a slight cut, and the elastic cushion layer showed a large cut. Pulling along the cut with their hands, the layer easily tore apart with minimal stretching. Ironically, a large number of substandard elastic cushion layers were scattered near a slogan that read, 'Grid management, penetrating supervision, making safety hazards having nowhere to hide.'" End quote. Upon returning to the investigation site yesterday, the outlet reports that their two reporters were assaulted by local heavies. During the attack, it's reported that their phones were confiscated and one suffered an injury to his right hand. Of course, this story coming from state media itself has blown up, and yesterday evening, state-run China Railway 7th Group issued a statement expressing, quote, "serious concern," end quote, and that they have, quote, "dispatched a working group to the site immediately and are fully cooperating with the investigation by Anhui Ganzhou Railway Anhui Co. Limited. If quality issues are found, they will be dealt with severely," end quote. Heads will roll, but of course the question is, how many safety issues on high-speed rail construction have not been discovered? Such are the systemic risks of a closed system. Next up, China's annual production of new energy vehicles, EVs, surpassed the 10 million milestone for the first time on Thursday, yesterday. A ceremony celebrating the achievement was held in Wuhan, central China's Hubei province, under the guidance of the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology and organized by the China Association of Automobile Manufacturers. Representatives from over a dozen automakers attended the event, where multiple vehicles rolled off the production line to collectively mark the milestone of China's 10 millionth new energy vehicle this year. The milestone is yet another sign of China's prowess in the EV industry. China is the world's runaway leader in the EV industry, with sales of pure electric and plug-in hybrid cars accounting for 65% of the global total in the first half of 2024, according to the China Passenger Car Association. However, it is also a symbol of massive overcapacity, a source of growing concern domestically and tensions internationally. Gao Shen, an independent analyst in Shanghai, speaking to Hong Kong-based South China Morning Post, expressed yesterday, quote, "The rapid growth of EVs will come at the expense of the petrol car. Overcapacity woes are widespread because some car component producers also face a supply glut." End quote. The mainland has an overall manufacturing capacity of 40 million vehicles a year, but only sales of around 22 million units a year, according to Shanghai-based consultancy Automobility. Similarly, battery manufacturers, which number close to 50 in the mainland, will be able to produce 4,800 gigawatt hours of batteries in 2025, 4 times the projected demand for the country's EV makers. Of course, this overproduction has been fueled by massive state subsidies. Calculations by China Business News showed 15 EV startups which have either collapsed or have been driven to the verge of insolvency. This has caused China to turn to international markets, which in turn triggered a backlash against Chinese trade generally, and Chinese EVs in particular, especially in the EU and the US. Last month, the EU voted to impose an additional tariff of 17 to 35.3% on Chinese-made pure EVs following an anti-subsidy investigation. The US has also raised tariffs on Chinese-made EVs to 100% from 25% from September for the same reason. And this brings us nicely to our final topic for today: trade tensions and China's coming trade wars. But just quickly, if you're getting some value from today's episode, don't forget to hit the like button. It's a tremendous help for the channel. It's one of the few ways the channel can grow is if you like, tell the algorithm this is a good channel worth watching, and share this with someone who you think would get some value from it. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description below for those who want to keep this channel financially sustainable. I rely primarily on your support to keep going in this regard. And if you have not done so already and you think you'll watch another one of these episodes, don't forget to subscribe. There is one other quick housekeeping point I wanted to cover while we're here. Regular viewers may have noticed that in the last few days there have been some new thumbnails up. I've reached out to a new thumbnail design company. I'm going to be working with them for the next 4 weeks, and we will be A/B testing their designs with my traditional designs. Some of the designs that they have provided are not exactly the first designs that I would like to use, but this is to get an idea of feedback and data and use that analysis going forward. Just because you see a certain style does not necessarily mean that this will be used in the future. It's just to get a broad set of feedback on the different styles. Ultimately, of course, I would like to use very basic and boring thumbnails to match the nature of the grounded news analysis that we do on the channel. But unfortunately, that is not the nature of the beast of YouTube. On YouTube, we are forced to have more provocative thumbnails to get click-through rates to certain thresholds. In the past, when I have experimented with using more basic and more boring thumbnails, YouTube has penalized the channel with up to 90% reductions in exposure. So I will try my best to find the right balance between a provocative thumbnail that is not over the top to match the content. And my commitment will always be that the content itself within the video will always be grounded and sober. Let's continue with the episode. China has readied strong countermeasures to retaliate against American companies if President-elect Donald Trump rekindles trade conflicts between the two largest economies. Following Trump's unexpected 2016 win, China was unprepared for the ensuing tariffs, tightening controls and sanctions that targeted its firms. However, with a much more difficult economic situation, China has since implemented robust laws allowing it to blacklist foreign companies, impose sanctions, and potentially block American firms from vital supply chains. For the year through October, the People's Republic of China had a trade surplus of over 5 trillion RMB and may be on track to exceed $1 trillion for the whole year. As Brad Setster, senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, said on X this week, quote, "With Chinese export prices still falling, export volume growth was enormous. The overall story is of an economy that is again growing off exports." End quote. There is also a move in the US Congress to revoke permanent normal trade relation, PNTR, status with China, and while revoking this would not increase tariffs to the threatened 60% level, it would be a very clear signal that decoupling, not de-risking, is the goal of US policymakers. Wang Dong of Peking University states that while China would initially attempt negotiations in the case of a strong trade war momentum from a new Trump administration, it is ready to protect its interests if dialogue fails. Although President Biden maintained many of Trump's China policies, Trump's recent appointment of China hawks, which we've been following this week, indicates a likely escalation. Andrew Gilholm of Control Risks highlights Beijing's potential to harm US interests, citing sanctions against Skydio, a US drone maker, which we have covered recently, and threats to include PVH, the parent of Calvin Klein, on its unreliable entity list. Beijing is also bolstering its supply chain resilience and fostering trade with countries less allied to the US. However, there's only so much that Beijing can do. A new report published by Chinese financial media outlet Caixin yesterday argues that as China and the US waged its trade war during the first Trump administration, quote, retaliatory tariffs were not as effective a tool for replacing American imports. For China, the key to import substitution was technical advancement and the price advantage of its industrial supply chains, end quote. And of course, the massive elephant in the room is that China, with its massive trade surplus, is deeply vulnerable. As we discussed yesterday, Yang Zhou, an economist at Shanghai's Fudan University, concluded in a recent study that Trump's tariffs on the Chinese goods during his first term inflicted more than 3 times as much damage to the Chinese economy as they did to the US economy. This isn't surprising when we can see here that the US is the biggest component of China's trade surplus, and markets are not confident about China's investment outlook. Foreign companies are pulling money from China, with foreign direct investment liabilities dropping in the first 9 months of the year, according to official data released last Friday. Should the decline continue for the rest of the year, it would be the first annual net outflow of FDI since at least 1990, when data begins. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a good Friday, have a restful weekend, and I will see you all tomorrow.